Alex, as a design build firm, you are a contractor. Your firm has contracting. What are some of the challenges that you see from, let's put the contractor hat on because we're contractors.
Yep.
And what are some of the challenges that you see in our industry and some of the effects of where our industry is headed?
Yeah.
So,
There's so many challenges, and I hope I'm not the only one who sees so many challenges.
We'll talk and agree, I'm sure.
Yeah. One of them is a lot of the old hats are retiring.
Yeah.
And your subs are your lifeblood.
They are.
And when that old hat who was there all of a sudden retires, and he or she was making sure the crew was doing whatever they were doing, and you're being a contractor just happy and then all of a sudden you realize that sub that you've used for a while, why are they missing stuff? What's going on? And that doesn't always happen, but our generation is getting older.
And they don't have the years of experience.
Exactly. And it's not their fault. One of the positives I see on that is that there are a whole bunch of people who are thinking about new ways to do things, or thinking about it from first principles. Do I have to do it that way? A lot of the relationships that we have with subs isn't about, hey, get the lowest offer, and I'm sure it's not yours either, and then try to screw us with RFIs, you know? So there is, that new blood is needed, but it's definitely an issue.
Yeah, I think that we struggle with that. And sometimes our customers, because we have an open book, hey, here's the bid. Oh, did you get more bids? I can get more bids, but we need to go with this guy because they're trusted. They know what they're doing. They're not the least expensive bid that we may receive, but you want a home that's built well, right?
Yep.
And you want this to go smooth. So you got to trust the contractor on some of those things. It's hard sometimes for the clients, but it's like our plumber he took over for a plumber that taught me in the business when I was a kid. And our plumber was our plumber. And he just took care of us, took care of our clients. And you're like, you can't buy that with a low bid.
No.
And you got to earn respect and trust and value your subs.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of paper contractors, is what I call them, who really are sub bashers, vendor bashers. And they're just like, oh, you're too high. You got to do it for this price. Oh, no. It's like, no, I want to respect your trade. And I want to respect the prices, and you have to make money in it. And you got to respect that. Just like my clients respect that. I'm going to make money in this build. Yep. If you don't want me to make money in the build, I don't really want to be your builder, because this is what we do.
Yeah.
So.
It's so funny because we just had, the client moved some things around, totally normal, no problem. But we took over, there was kind of this break in the situation. So it was kind of a new thing. And the sub gave a bid. It was in line with my expectations. The client said, fine, smoothly. They're working on it tomorrow. No big deal. But as I was driving back, I thought, because they didn't know the sub, and again, there was this transition period that happened. And I just thought in my head, what if they said, hey, what is this guy ripping me off? Right? Yeah. It wasn't get another bid in my head. It was, is this guy ripping me off? And this is a fictitious conversation in my head was, my subs don't rip me off, because if I catch wind of it, because I do enough projects, I could call you up and be like, hey, for this, should it be, X amount? They wouldn't work for me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use them on the next job. And as a homeowner, you can build your own house and that's all fine. But you don't have that power of, if they screw me over, guess who's not getting the next couple jobs?
Absolutely.
Them. I think what I'm getting at is that they can think if you're just picking one sub, they're getting screwed over on price or anything like that. No, that's not what we're about. Because if all those subs did that to us, we would never get jobs. So we're just trying to do a fair job for a fair project.
And they're our lifeblood. So if we have bad subs, we're going to get bad reviews.
Yep.
And so they're part of the team. And so I think that it is critical to educate your customers as well on how difficult our business is, and that we don't work in a clean room, and that, you know, the entry level to some of these trades is so easy that people just start and then they get into it, and you're like, okay, so we look for long-standing subs that are going to be around. I love it when on this one, a client, we are doing a solar system, and he's like, I don't care if it's more. I only want a solar from a solar company that's been around and is going to be around.
Yep.
Because it's like, we can find you another bid. But he's like, no. And that's what you respect about building quality.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Some of these things would be terrible if they went wrong and you just use someone that just fly by night.
No, you can't do it. So yeah, vendor, one of the things that we're working to do is we help open relationships with our vendors, saying, hey, this isn't working. How can we improve this for us, mainly for our clients? You get a cabinet line. Oh, they switched something in their manufacturing, and now we're seeing the ramifications down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's just not, you're fired. What can we do to help you improve?
Yep.
How can, what is it that we need in the field that verifies what we're going to get is what we ordered? And so how do we improve without pointing the fingers and cussing and, saying, I'm never going to use you again?
Yep.
Which is sometimes how you feel, but you can't always go on your feelings, because you want the people on your team, whether it be a vendor or a trade person, to be getting better at what they do, because that's only going to make you better as a builder.
Absolutely. So, and they have to train people and stuff like that. And that's all part of the process and has to be explained too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it can be tough.
Yeah. And that's just like the stuff that we can kind of control. I could go on a rant on the stuff that really affects us that we only have a small influence on. And that has to do with everything from, the codes to environmental policy to even the policy of the government. And it's weird how much that has a play on it. So where's the line between, hey, your building has to be efficient and green, versus maybe the power that comes in should be efficient and green? Yeah. Where's that trade-off? And the same thing too for materials and what you're using. So for example, wood, I heard this I was in North Dakota. North Dakota is a different place when you go to the western side. There's no laws there.
Yeah, it's just a wild North Dakota.
I've seen some pretty crazy stuff out there. But during the oil times, there's this guy out there, and I'm not saying this statement is correct, but I use it as a way that people should think about things. He was from Washington, the state, not the city. And he goes, trees are weeds. And I said, what? He's like, trees are weeds. You leave a field, especially in Washington and Canada, it's going to grow trees.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's true. But what I'm saying is that, let's say you were building out of sticks and that you did manage the forest and replanted them. You can build a lot of stuff. Trees do grow. They do capture carbon. They are a carbon sink and all that. And that's all great. And to go on, the problem that I find that, at least in our area we're fighting, it's everything must be sustainable, which is adding a whole bunch of costs. But the problem is everything is unaffordable.
Yes.
And it's this dichotomy of these rules and regulations. And why I said it goes all the way up to the federal government is that the interest rates isn't just a function of Fed policy. I was on a plane talking to a financial guy, and he was trying to explain it. Some of it's still over my head. Yeah. But it's the health also of the Fed balance sheet, because where people are going to stick their money is depending on what interest rates are going to get. And if the U.S. is the reserve currency, and if they can't pay back their debt, that rate's going to go up, which means money won't easily flow into other places. It will flow into that because the rates are going back up. So we have all of these forces, which I think people would agree. You see, and probably customers, an 8% interest rate on your mortgage versus 3%.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Well, but the 3% is unheard of in my lifetime. Like my dad, when he was a builder.
In 2016, 17, you didn't get the 3%?
No, I did.
Oh, okay.
But before that period, right?
Yes.
My dad, 1987, that was the first construction bust in Colorado. Interest rates were 17, 18%.
Yeah.
But costs weren't as high. When you have super high costs, even an 8% means a lot, but I bought my first house at 8%, but it only cost $150,000.
Yeah.
And now an average, it's $500,000 to get into a house. Easy. And so the payment, but I think we'll adjust. I don't know that we'll ever get back to 3%. Yep. I'd be more scared if they went higher. I think you could probably get a 6.5 now.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me that these kids out of college are coming out and buying homes. And I'm like, wow, like I don't want to afford that mortgage payment.
Yeah. And I think like your question is great because what are the challenges? We could go on, but I think one of the challenges is if people don't step up and advocate and push, it's going to be so easy for things not to happen.
How would somebody advocate and push for that?
I don't. Are you a part of the Home Builders Association?
I am not.
You should.
Yeah, you should it on me.
Yeah,
we used to be.
Yep.
I think that's probably the one benefit, but otherwise, like we'd be involved, and it was kind of just like a vendor club.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, what are we really doing here? Sure, when there's code things that you want to fight, but
yep. And maybe that's it. And maybe I'm just, how you get stuck on things, like a new trend or whatever. So we just started probably 6-8 months ago. And one of the things that they have is, yes, they have those vendors things. I haven't done any of them. I haven't even gone to more than one group meeting, but they have committees for code and for different cities.
That's important.
There was where they had one meeting, this is what Lance went to, where different city officials came and reported to the builders of what demand they're seeing and what they're doing and what their times are. And the reason why I am subtly pushing you is because I remember when we were politically active during our construction of our 9 units, because it was almost political to get something built.
Yeah.
And one of the advice was, hey, if you want anything done, don't just come and just say your point. And it might be the most rational. You could have an expert opinion on building and construction. And you could know more than every city council person or every planning and zoning about this, whatever issue you are going to talk about. It doesn't matter. You're just one guy, right? When you bring a group to it, just psychologically, like, oh, there's 8, 10, 15 people out here. Are we in the wrong?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like they did it in Louisville. And that's one of the challenges is each municipality manages their own codes. And then they make their own adoptions and their own changes and deletions. And so when you build in 5 or 7 different municipalities, you have to work with, understanding with what each one is.
Yeah.
So I'd say like in Louisville, I understand the code probably more than any other municipality. Boulder as well.
Yeah.
Unincorporated Boulder County. But outside of that, that would bring a code change. What would bring an interest rate change?
It's so funny.
I don't know.
Besides the Fed just obviously doing some of it, but if the government is still going to spend out of control, which then means and this is why the Fed had to do that as well. 1, inflation's going up, so then things are still going to happen. But 2, the interest rate would then naturally go up for mortgages because it has to compete in the free market. So it's so funny. I was younger, but I remember Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, and they got to a $250 billion surplus. They balanced the budget and paid down the debt and had a $250 billion surplus, right? Yeah. Now we have, I don't even want to say the wrong number. Is it like $30 trillion?
I don't even know, but
30 something ridiculous. Yeah, me and you remember Bill Clinton was not that long ago, right? And we dug ourselves into this big of a hole, and it's astonishing.
Yeah.
Because those numbers that we can't even remember because we don't even want to say.
We don't think in trillions.
In trillions. It is astonishing. And it's astonishing too that it's such a fight. And it's not just because it's political, left versus right. Yeah. It's because those congressmen and senators want, to bring back money to their community. So it's almost a human nature setup deal as well.
Yeah. No, I'm intrigued because interest rates, we saw it right after COVID, and then the rates went up. During COVID, it was a boom. Everybody was pulling second mortgages and HELOCs, and they lived they got stuck in their house during that time, and they're like, I'm going to spend this money and make this place if it happens again.
Yep.
And then they kept going up, creeping up. And, when they got to 8%, you stop seeing those calls. People are like, wow, should I do this?
Yeah.
So interest rates definitely affect us.
Yeah.
The code, unincorporated Boulder County is just adopting the 2025 code with their amendments.
Yep.
And have you started to dig into those yet?
No, we heard about it.
Okay. Well, just the code, the building code, the energy code. Boulder County has its own planning code that they're updating, which will be a challenge, but for people, but just the building code. I'm putting together an estimate on a house that'll be built after the end of March.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to say, okay, how's that going to affect our pricing when we actually start digging? What's the energy code? Because it hasn't been fully architected.
Yep.
We don't have how the energy auditor and the architect are going to solve for these codes. A lot more insulation, continuous insulation.
Yep.
And how do you solve the continuous insulation, which is great, with the engineer and getting engineers up to speed on how to still do an exterior shear wall, but with a continuous insulation, and then having an architect actually say, oh, what about the connection detail between the insulation on the foundation and the house insulation with its cladding?
Yeah.
What's that detail?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, a contractor's going to make it up in the field and it's not going to look good.
And then there's all the new electrical rules for the lights switching up and down and doing all that. And we had a project that it had to go from 2018 to 2021. And it wasn't a big house by normal standards of a big house. I think it cost $15,000 more in electrical.
Yeah. Well, and now we're at the 2023 NEC.
Yeah.
And most municipalities are doing that. And the energy code affects the electrical.
Yeah.
Because now they want more efficient and different sources.
Yeah.
The electrification is really big. We, coming out of the Marshall Fire rebuilds that we did, there was probably, out of the 15, there was probably like 5 that we didn't even hook up the gas meter to the house.
Yeah.
It was all electric. They did qualify as net zero. That I think is something that should change. But, the costs, to run an electric air source heat pump is great.
Yeah.
To add an electric backup to it, the copper, the circuits that you have to run just for the backup, it's costly.
And you mean backup as in
if the temperature drops below -15, an electric element kicks on and air blows through the electric element, and that can cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars more a month to run that if we do come into a cold snap.
Yeah.
So, it's like, great, it's all electric, but the install costs, and people are like, oh, well, don't do gas. So then we do an electric backup as opposed to a gas backup.
We've been doing dual fuel.
Yeah.
Just for that purpose, because even if you can set it so if it goes below 10, then you're pulling gas, which is going to, save your heat save your money, all that other stuff. That one doesn't cost too much when you do a dual fuel heat pump system. But
that's the way I would say go.
But know what's a problem? I won't name it now because I work in these cities.
Yeah.
They're basically they're de facto banning gas. So we can't even have that.
Yeah. It's and they want to ban it, and they want affordable housing as well. Yep. And a lot of these technologies are new. We've already had some service calls on a good brand name heat pump.
Yes.
On several of these.
Yes.
And
same.
And customers understanding how they work. You know, I mean, they just go in and expect heat and expect cool, and the temperature drops. So it's educating the clients to how these systems work. Yes, they're efficient, but you got to adjust to that.
There's easily in some of these codes, and 2025 we'll see a 10 to, I'm not even kidding, 50K bump in prices. That amount of money can buy a really nice solar panel system. Yeah. If we could substitute that money and honestly go to 2018 code with some solar generation, holy cow.
Well, here's a good perspective. Like with the city of Louisville going to a 2021 IECC with the RC amendment, which they've changed, it doesn't build a better home, a better building. It allows you, talking about your source of energy, gets you to the net zero. So you got to design your house to a HERS 47, build to a HERS 47. Then you can apply either on-site or off-site renewables to meet your net zero. So really, you're not building a more efficient home. Like, why wouldn't you say, let's take that money and build a better building for our community? Let the electrical supply get more efficient, like you talked about. Yeah. And let's work, that way and build better buildings. Yeah. Like, what if we could build a structure that was a HERS 30 and the electrical source didn't matter? Yeah. So that it's somewhat of an electric tax.
Yeah. It's weird. Maybe because I'm too deep into this industry, but I'm trying to think of analogies where like they put you in this crosshairs, you're demonized because it costs too much, but then they make it, too much. Because I honestly feel, if you gave me time and go to an extreme, I could blanket the house in a good insulation, make it out of sticks, use some of the things that we talked about, and it wouldn't meet code whatsoever, but it would be better than by far, because of the spatial arrangement, knowing how heat goes, knowing how sun goes, than anything built from 2000 to 2010. And I mean like by far.
Absolutely.
And I guarantee that design would also be cheaper than what the codes are making you do right now. Mm-hmm. But
we've built a low energy home. It's passive, 18-inch walls, 3 different wall assemblies, different layers of insulation. Totally cool. I love the idea of, using less energy makes it more efficient. And your building envelope and everything, it's expensive.
Oh yeah.
And to really design, if you want to build a passive house cost effectively, there's no architecture. It's a box.
Yep.
You're building a Yeti cooler, as somebody described what passive means to me, and you're just like, okay, but you don't want us to build boxes. You want us to build beautiful communities. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, completely agree.
But the code stuff and the adoption of some of these new energy codes, the full electrification. So in some municipalities, you can put in a gas fireplace, but you have to run a circuit and bury it behind the wall for a future retrofit to an electric fireplace. Okay. So now we're spending money on the build that isn't used and probably will never be used.
And it's not just the money on the bill. That money is part of the mortgage. So you're paying 3 times over 30 years for something
that you will not use or that you might use in 30 years.
Yeah.
And so it's the electrification and how they're interpreting the code within each municipality is a challenge for builders at times. Because, this municipality says, oh, well, I read it this way. You got to do that. And this one's like, oh, yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah. Because there is an interpretation by, the city planner or the building department that you have to figure it out before you go in. So.
Yeah. You know what? Here's my analogy. You know how we talked about different senators and congressmen of either stripe are trying to get as much money out of the government to go back so that they can get reelected. I almost feel on the International Building Code that the people that are voting for it, the city council people, want to be green and they say, this is greener, I'm going to vote for it. But where the rubber hits the road in all those codes is I would bet actually money on this. And you can't bet money on this, but I would, that a lot of these code updates are coming from the product manufacturers.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're getting the same scenario as like, hey, you're going to make, you want to make sure there's more insulation. You want to make sure these fancier electrical things are going in. You want to make sure that, it's a higher quality standard because you make more money on this. If every one of you got your way, which is happening, you might stop the construction industry because people can't afford it.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
I would like to see with these code amendments, and when it gets into the commercial code, a city have to retrofit all their buildings to meet the current code before they implement it on the small businesses.
Yeah. I love that idea.
Because I think that once they see what the cost is, the challenge is to take their fleet, place that, where they park their vehicles and service them and say, oh, we got to make this green to the current standards.
Yeah.
And say, oh, but we'll approve the guy over the street who wants to build a new one. And the cost is just prohibitive.
Yeah.
So
that's a great idea. I love that.
Well, Alex, man, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And I'm excited. You have a podcast as well. Yep. Tell me about your podcast.
It's called Inside the Firm. So just wherever you can find podcasts, take a listen. It started with me and my business partner needing to find time to talk about business. So that's why it was named Inside the Firm. It's taking you into the nitty gritty of our architecture firm, and everything affects it, down from the minuscule stuff to the big stuff that we just talked about. So go check it out if you're inclined.
Yeah, it's not very architectural specific. It's performance, it's business mind, it's, a lot of coaching and stuff. It's pretty interesting. So awesome. Maybe someday I'll come and you can pick my brain on what's in there.
Oh, so. Absolutely. It's happening. It's happening.
All right. Well, hey, one other thing. If you were to go to a restaurant in unincorporated Boulder County with your special one, where would you go? Only one.
Only one? Probably Acreage up here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Just because, you know what? It's not because of the food. I'm sure the food, I've had the food. It's fine. It's because of the view and the ambiance and the subtle architecture and all that.
Yeah, it's beautiful up there. Yep. So, well, great. Well, we'll catch up here soon, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Matt.
All right.